Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump right into today's explainer. We're looking at a global situation report, unpacking the mounting critiques and unprecedented fallout from the U.S. strategy in the ongoing Iran war. This was a conflict initially promised to be quick, swift, but instead, it's triggered a massive cascade of geopolitical and economic shockwaves across the globe. So we're going to break down exactly what the original goals were, what is actually happening on the ground right now, and how both allies and adversaries are maneuvering in response.
Here is the flight path for today. We're looking at 5 key tactical zones. First, unmet objectives and strategic stalemate. Second, how the NATO alliance fractures. Third, the way adversaries shift the global board. Fourth, the economic shockwaves. And finally, the Pentagon's blockade strategy. These 5 zones are absolutely crucial to understanding how this conflict is literally reshaping the global chessboard.
All right, part 1, unmet objectives and strategic stalemate. We are zooming in on the primary strategic theater first to weigh the actual military execution against those initial pre-war expectations. Now, Professor John Mearsheimer laid out a really helpful tactical checklist of the 4 initial U.S. demands going into this. Complete regime change, a total halt to nuclear enrichment, stopping support for regional proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas, and removing and destroying missile capabilities. The administration basically assumed that hitting that first domino, regime change, would naturally knock down the other 3. But as the conflict drags on, current intelligence points to a stark reality. Not a single one of these objectives has been completely achieved.
It is a classic case of expectation versus reality, right? The Pentagon launched Operation Epic Fury, expecting it to be this laser-focused campaign that would dismantle Iran's infrastructure in a matter of weeks. Just weeks! But the CIA and allied intelligence agencies offered a major reality check. You simply cannot just bomb a nation of 93 million people into regime change. Historically speaking, massive airstrikes don't break a population's resolve. They actually cause citizens to rally around their leadership. It hardens them.
So what is the actual status on the ground? Well, Iran totally anticipated this asymmetric kind of conflict. U.S. intelligence shows that at least a third, 33%, of Iran's ballistic missiles survived the initial strikes. And their drone production? It's largely intact, and they are actively relocating those facilities right now to safer areas. But here's the real kicker, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has essentially turned one of the world's most vital shipping lane into their own personal toll booth. It is a massive strategic leverage point.
Which brings us to part 2, the NATO alliance fractures. Let's pan the map over to Europe for a second, because we are seeing an unprecedented barrage of public dissent hitting the traditional NATO alliance. Take German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. His critique is a stark, very public break from Washington. He stated clearly that the Americans have no strategy, and argued that entering this without an exit plan means an entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian leadership. He is pointing straight at the last 2 decades of entanglement in Iraq and Afghanistan as painful, ignored lessons, and saying that right now, Tehran is skillfully outmaneuvering the US.
And building right on top of that, you have UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer drawing a super hard line. He is actively refusing to participate. He flat out said he will never let the UK be dragged into a war that isn't in their interests, directly citing Iraq as the lesson they should have learned. For the UK, the immediate economic harm to domestic households, things like stagnant economies and pain at the gas pump, way outweighs these distant military goals.
France is echoing the exact same resistance. President Emmanuel Macron vocally rejected the whole premise that bombings alone can fix the situation. He literally said, look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya. These traditional allies are openly defying US pressure to join the offensive. Honestly, it represents a pretty staggering shift in the international order that the US and Europe spent the last century building together. Okay, moving to part 3, adversaries shift the global board. Because, look, while NATO is arguing amongst themselves, other global powers are absolutely not sitting idly by. While the US is super focused on tactical, direct hits, adversaries are playing a massive multi-theater game. Think about it. By using that maritime blockade tactic in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is directly driving up European inflation. By delaying nuclear talks diplomatically, they are perfectly distracting US resources away from Ukraine. And by taking high-profile meetings in Moscow, they are boldly signaling a strengthened Russia-Iran axis. It's a highly calculated web. The data points to a newly emboldened alignment across the board. Russia and Iran just signed a 20-year strategic partnership. You have the Russian defense minister celebrating partnerships in Pyongyang. Meanwhile, China is reportedly stepping in to supply critical spy satellite data and ballistic missile components. And Iran, instead of bowing to pressure, they've actually proposed delaying all nuclear talks until the war entirely ends. Washington flat out rejected that, of course, but it buys Tehran valuable time and cements their pivot toward a unified China-Russia bloc.
Now, part 4, the economic shockwaves. We have to look at the massive collateral damage hitting the global supply chain and, our domestic wallets. These tactical maneuvers have very painful realities back home.
Look at this monumental shift. The UAE just announced their departure from OPEC, effective May 1st. That alone sent absolute shockwaves through the energy market. But the really wild part? At the exact same time, the UAE signed 24 new strategic trade deals directly with China. What we are witnessing is global energy transactions beginning a systematic shift away from the US dollar to the Chinese RMB. Countries are actively seeking economic stability outside of the traditional US sphere of influence.
To put that economic strain into perspective, check out this number, 87%. That is the massive year-to-date surge in the cost of urea fertilizer, which is now sitting at $720 a ton. Why? Because of that bottleneck in the Straits of Hormuz. Remember, nearly 30% of the world's fertilizer travels right through there. When that lane becomes a toll booth, the cost of growing our food literally skyrockets. And the direct result of that? A devastating 46% surge in U.S. farm bankruptcies. American farmers are getting completely squeezed by these inflated fertilizer costs. The American Farm Bureau Federation is reporting massive spikes in Chapter 12 bankruptcy filings, especially across the Midwest and Southeast. It is just a brutal reminder that a conflict thousands of miles away can absolutely crush the backbone of our domestic rural economy.
So, how is Washington responding? That brings us to Part 5, the Pentagon's blockade strategy. Let's head back to the U.S. Command Center to examine how the Pentagon is defending its current position on the world stage.
Well, the Pentagon remains completely unapologetic about going it alone. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth basically put allies on notice. He stated they aren't counting on Europe and suggested European allies should do less talking at fancy conferences and get in a boat. They are officially warning allies that the era of free riding on American military protection is over, enforcing their will even if it means openly mocking European partners for not committing maritime forces.
The tactical reality right now is an ironclad, ever-growing maritime blockade. Operation Epic Fury is currently in day 55. The Navy has issued strict shoot-to-destroy orders for any Iranian fast boats attempting to lay mines, and they've already forcefully turned around 34 ships in the Gulf of Oman. The objective remains completely rigid. The administration insists they have all the time in the world and will maintain this endless pressure until Iran completely abandons its nuclear program.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we are watching a real-time stress test of American military hegemony. On one hand, you have unmatched naval power enforcing a rigid blockade. On the other, a fractured NATO, a strengthened Russia-China-Iran axis, and domestic farmers paying the price. It leaves us with a critical question to consider. Will an ironclad tactical blockade be enough to win a multi-theater war? Or has the global chessboard permanently shifted away from American control? Thanks for joining me today to unpack all this, and keep your eyes on the board.